Mr. President.
Senator from Minnesota.
Mr. President, how much time is remaining on our side?
28.5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I'm here to talk about the need to replenish the funds in the Highway Trust Fund. And I have to tell you, Mr. President, you have visited our state, and you know that about a year ago, a bridge just fell down in the middle of the Mississippi River. And I was thinking as I listened to the senator from Oklahoma talk about the promises that we make to our children, the promises that we make to future generations. Well, I figure the people of this country think we've made a promise to them that we're going to have safe roads, that we're going to have safe bridges. And we didn't keep up that promise to 13 people who died that day when they plummeted into the river, the Mississippi River. And we didn't keep the promise to hundreds of people that were injured and all those cars that went crashing down 8-lane highway in the middle of the Mississippi River, 6 blocks from my house. We didn't keep that promise. And when you look at the history of this Highway Trust Fund, this trust fund was rated once before, many years before I ever came to Congress, by this exact amount of money, I believe, something like $8 billion. It was rated of that money, and it was taken out of the trust fund because it had some money and put into the general fund. And what we're doing today, at the request of the administration, of the Bush administration, is to take that money from the general fund and put it back into the Highway Trust Fund, because we have a promise for public safety for the people of this country. Now, my colleagues have been talking about priorities, and I think there has been an issue of priorities. I can tell you, I would like to pay for some of the things that are going on in this country when we see that deficit announced. And I can tell you how I would do it, how I would pay for that deficit. I would start bringing our troops home from Iraq. That's $10 billion a month. And it's ironic, that figure, because just today, Senator Inhofe was at the hearing. We had a hearing in the Environment and Public Works Committee about bridges and about the expenditures on bridges and trying to keep bridges safe with Congressman Oberstar and others. And one of the witnesses actually told us that it would be about $10 billion a year to start bringing up our bridges to safety over the next few years. And I thought that is exactly the amount of money we're spending per month in Iraq. So that's one way we can get the money if we really wanted to, and if some of my friends on the other side of the aisle would have the will to want to pay for this important infrastructure investment. Another is to close some of the loopholes that have allowed people to store money in the Cayman Islands and hide money. Another is to post capital gains. That alone would bring in $15 billion a year. Another is to roll back some of the tax cuts on the very wealthiest, the people making over $250,000 a year, individuals over $200,000 a year. That would bring in something between $50 and $60 billion a year. So I don't have trouble trying to find the money to pay for this. But we have been unable to get our friends, whether it's the AMT fix or any of these other tax fixes for the middle class, we've been unable to get them to pay for this. So we're left where we are right now, in a request from the administration to pay for this from the general funds so that we don't have contractors, we don't have people out of work who are supposed to be working on construction projects. And this means something to me because I see it every day. I can tell you, with the help of Congress, that bridge is going up, and it's going to be opening on Monday. So it is kind of ironic to me that here we're debating whether or not we're going to replenish our nation's highways when everyone has given these big, glorious speeches about the needs to invest in infrastructure. On the anniversary of that bridge going up again, some people are actually saying that we should let this Highway Trust Fund die in the vine and let these jobs die in the vine. Now, we know that, I'm just going to use some of the examples for bridges and what we learned today. We learned today that fully 1/4 of America's 600,000 bridges have aged so much that their physical condition or ability to withstand current traffic levels is simply inadequate. And one of the things we've seen on our roads and our bridges in the last few years is that we're seeing something of a boon in our rural economies with this new energy economy. We're seeing wind turbines being transported on our roads and on our rail. We're seeing biofuels, and we're seeing more wear and tear on our roads and on our rail. And as we move to this next century economics, with the next century energy, with looking at more and more of our energy being produced from the workers and the farmers of this country. We can't be stuck in the last century's transportation system. Now, I'm not going to pretend that just replenishing the money into this highway trust fund is going to bring us to where we need to be with public transportation and where we truly need to go with infrastructure in this country to compete on the world stage. But at least it's going to stop the bleed so that we're going to be able to keep with the ongoing projects that we have right now, that we have going on right now. I'm glad the administration is finally supporting doing something about this. It's been sad that we've been blocked on the other side now 3 times to try to fund this important transit fund. As President Kennedy once said, building a road or highway isn't pretty, but it's something that our economy needs to have. And we see that in that bridge in Minnesota, but we see it over and over again in the rural areas with the development of the wind farms and the development of solar and ethanol. Just to give you a sense of what we're seeing in our state, Mr. President, for the first 6 months in 2007, ethanol production in the United States totaled nearly 3 billion gallons, 32% higher than the same period last year. Now, of course, we're going to be moving to cellulosic, but that's still going to mean transportation in our rural areas. Currently, there are 128 ethanol plants nationwide with total annual production capacity nearing close to 7 billion gallons. An additional 85 plants are under construction. Total ethanol production is expected to exceed 13 billion gallons per year by early 2009. Now, in terms of transportation, this means that an average square mile of land in southern Minnesota, which now generates the equivalent of 80 loaded semi-trucks per year, could soon produce double that, 160 loads of grain per year. So we're seeing more wear and tear on our roads. It's a good thing. We don't want all $600,000 a minute going to foreign oil. We want to be able to produce energy in this country with wind and solar and biofuels and homegrown energy and more domestic production. But that's going to mean having a transportation system that can keep up with our growing economy and the kind of truck freight and what we want to see in this country. Mr. President, I'll end with what I began with here, and that is that we're going to be opening a new bridge in Minnesota. But every time I go by that bridge 6 blocks from my house, I always think about that bus, that school bus of those kids that was perched precariously by some miracle, didn't go over the side into the water like the hundreds of other cars and trucks that did. And every kid on that bus was saved. They called it the miracle bus. We have a promise to those kids that were on that bus that this isn't going to happen again, that we're going to keep our roads and highway, that's the #1 goal of government is public safety. And public safety means not just safety on our streets, but safety in our streets. And that means better roads, better bridges, and a better transportation system. So that is why, while we would like to have done this in another way, we're in a crisis situation with our transit fund, and we should support it, and we should replenish the fund. With that, Mr. President, I yield the floor.